Have you ever thought about what it would take to, fundamentally change, to shed old habits and live a totally different way?
It's a big question, right? Something a lot of people wrestle with.
Definitely. And today on the deep dive, we're looking at a really specific take on this from a message outline. It was delivered by Pastor W.F Kumuyi in Lagos, Nigeria, back on April 18th, 2025.
Ah, okay. During an Easter retreat, wasn't it?
That's the one. And the core idea is this concept of being crucified with Christ.
Which sounds intense.
It does.
Yeah.
So our mission today is just to unpack what that means according to this outline. We want to explore the main ideas, see what might be insightful or surprising for you, the listener.
Right. So understanding the source material itself, not necessarily endorsing it, but getting into what it says.
Exactly. We'll touch on the crucifixion of Jesus as presented, then this idea of believers being crucified with him, and finally being crucified unto the world. Ready to jump in?
Let's do it. The retreat context itself is interesting, suggesting this isn't just theory, but something intended for deep reflection and maybe transformation.
Good point. So the outline kicks off with the crucifixion of Jesus. It really hammers home that this wasn't just some random tragic event.
No, it frames it as something foretold. It points back to the Old Testament.
Yeah, mentioning things like Genesis 3.15, that early hint of conflict.
And Psalm 22, which is incredibly graphic about suffering.
Right. And Zechariah 12, talking about looking on someone who's been pierced. The idea presented is that this was all part of a divine plan.
Precisely. Linking those older texts with the New Testament accounts, like in Acts, builds this case for it being significant, preordained, purposeful.
And then there's a real focus on the perfection, the sinlessness of Jesus.
Yes, it heavily references John's Gospel, where Pilate says, "I find no fault in him."
Multiple times, actually. And passages like 2 Corinthians 5.21, knew no sin, Hebrews 7, 1 John 3. It keeps reinforcing this point.
So the core argument crystallizes. This perfect, sinless person was crucified.
For the imperfect, for humanity.
And the purpose given draws a lot from Isaiah 53, bearing griefs, carrying sorrows, wounded for our transgressions.
Healing through his stripes, that language.
Exactly. It's presented as a rescue mission, basically. Rescue from sin and, all the negative consequences that supposedly follow from it.
Like a substitution almost, paying a debt.
That's a very common interpretation, and it seems central here. Okay, so that's the foundation laid out in the outline.
Right. Then it makes this really interesting pivot. It talks about our crucifixion with this sacrificial substitute.
Romans 6.6 is key here. The old man being crucified.
So that the body of sin might be destroyed. Now, that word destroyed sounds pretty final.
It does, but the outline clarifies, right? It's not about physical death.
No, it means no longer being the slave to sin. Is that the idea?
That's exactly it. That we should not serve sin anymore, breaking its hold over our actions and impulses.
Okay, that makes more sense. It's about power, not annihilation.
Yeah. And this leads to the concept of living a continuously crucified life. Galatians 2.20 comes up again.
I am crucified with Christ. Nevertheless, I live, yet not I, but Christ liveth in me. That one.
That's the one. It's this paradox, isn't it? Dying to the old self to live a new life, supposedly empowered by Christ within.
So how does that translate into practice, according to the outline?
Well, it talks about proven conversion from the fleshly life, and it gets specific.
Right. It lists the works of the flesh from Galatians 5, things like envy, fits of rage, selfish ambition. It's quite a list.
It is a catalog of negative behaviors. And the point made is that crucifying the flesh means stopping these things, these actions and attitudes.
Not physical self-harm or anything like that.
No, definitely not. Galatians 5.24 says, "Those belonging to Christ have crucified the flesh with its passions and desires." It implies a decisive, ongoing turning away.
An active choice.
Yes. And then Romans 8 is brought in, mortifying the deeds of the body through the Spirit versus living by those base instincts, which the outline says leads to, spiritual death.
So it's a constant battle almost, choosing the spirit over the flesh.
That seems to be the implication. It makes you wonder how someone would, actively do that day to day.
The outline continues this theme with Colossians 3, mortify your members. Again, listing negatives, malice, deceit, filthy language.
And Ephesians 4, put off the old man, the old self. It's very much about shedding behaviors, lying, stealing, corrupt talk.
Replacing them with building others up.
Exactly. The goal presented is becoming a new creature in Christ, where, as 2 Corinthians 5.17 puts it, old things are passed away. Behold, all things are become new. A fundamental shift.
It's a tall order, a complete transformation.
It is, and it's framed not as a one-off event, but perpetual consecration to the faith life.
That sounds like a lifelong commitment.
It does. Referencing living by faith, not sight, from 2 Corinthians 5.7, and living for Christ, not just ourselves.
It also connects knowing Christ with actually doing what he says, right? Citing 1 John.
Yes. 1 John 2 links knowing him and keeping his commandments. And Ephesians 5 brings in walking in love as Christ loved. So it's belief, action, and attitude all tied together.
Okay. Belief, internal change, external actions. It's comprehensive. Then there's the third big part.
Right. Being crucified unto the sinful society, or simply the world.
Galatians 6.14 is central again. By whom the world is crucified unto me, and I unto the world. What does that mean, practically speaking?
It seems to mean a detachment from, or even a rejection of, the values and priorities of the surrounding culture, especially those seen as negative or ungodly.
The outline's view of the world seems quite...
It's pretty stark, yeah. It talks about the corruption and condemnation of the world, cites John 3, people loving darkness.
And 2 Corinthians 4, Satan being the god of this world. That's strong language.
Very strong. And James 4.4 is quoted, friendship with the world is enmity with God. It sets up a clear opposition. Two incompatible systems.
Wow. Okay, so the world is presented that negative.
And then comes the command and call out of the world.
Don't love the world or the things in it. 1 John 2.
Exactly. It argues that worldly desires, lust of the flesh, lust of the eyes, pride of life, are temporary and not from God.
And that question it includes, what would you do if the world were not watching you? That really hits home.
It does. It pushes past outward appearances to internal motivation. Are you doing things because they're right or for show?
A challenge to authenticity.
Completely. Which leads to the final point in this section. True crucifixion and cleansing from worldliness.
Referencing John 14.30, where Jesus says, the prince of this world finds nothing in him.
Right. The implication is that the believer, through this process, should also aim to be free from that negative influence, that the devil finds no foothold.
So it's about inner purity and resistance to external pressures.
That seems to be the essence of it, a complete separation in terms of values and allegiances.
Throughout the outline, there are these concise summary statements from Pastor Kumuyi. Some really stood out.
Yeah, those quotable quotes.
Like, as converted, crucified, and consecrated persons, we must stand at the gate of our lives and keep all sins out.
That's very direct, a call to vigilance.
And the purpose of Christ's crucifixion is to rescue us from sin and its consequences, just boiling it down.
Reinforcing that core idea of rescue.
Also connecting the old man being crucified with the body of sin being destroyed, meaning we stop serving sin to serve God instead.
Yeah, those really capture the flow of the argument. Foundation, personal application, separation from the world.
Okay, so pulling it all together from this deep dive, we've seen how the outline presents Jesus' crucifixion as foundational, a sinless sacrifice.
Then it extends that idea, calling for this personal crucifixion with Christ, a sort of death to the old self, the sinful nature.
Which involves actively turning away from specific negative behaviors and cultivating a new life, a faith life.
And finally, this concept of being crucified unto the world, meaning a detachment from its values and influences, seeing them as opposed to a godly life.
It's a very integrated framework, really.
It is. And as you, the listener, think about these ideas, maybe consider how they connect with your own journey. What does transformation mean to you?
How do concepts like sacrifice, changing priorities, or navigating cultural pressures play out in your life, whatever your beliefs might be?
It raises some fundamental questions about identity and purpose.
Definitely. Considering these perspectives from the outline, maybe the final thought to ponder is, what does it truly mean to live a life that's no longer defined just by your past or your impulses?
Or how might this idea of being, in a sense, dead to the world's negative pull actually influence your daily choices and what you hold dear?
Yeah, something to reflect on long after this deep dive is over.